America died on August 12th, 1994. As Americans, we are promised life, liberty, and a freaking World Series at the end of the baseball season. There had been a World Series every year since 1905 in a span that included 2 World Wars, 1 Great Depression, and pornography becoming easily accessible, and still, we all got our act together and went outside and played a championship series of baseball. If that wasn't enough, the parties involved shot a few more bullets into our Velveeta cheese hearts when we realized we wouldn't see if Tony Gwynn could finish the season above a .400 average, if the Expos could finish out the best season of their existence and thus hopefully make enough money to continue operations and wipe ice hockey out of residents' minds forever, if either Ken Griffey Jr. or Matt Williams would go on a run and catch Roger Maris's single-season home run record of 61, or if Donnie Baseball would finally see the postseason in his 13th year in the league. A true tragedy. If only you had a friend that specialized in answering baseball hypotheticals. Grab yourself a Fruitopia, pill yourself away from Tom Hanks playing a mentally disabled man and pissing no one off, and forget about PlayStation, you've got a Sega Saturn to buy. The Dugs are taking you back to 1994 to rewrite history. Welcome back to the Dugs. Everything we do here is an excuse to tell a lot of baseball stories and a lot of jokes, so if that sounds interesting to you, stay in the know and help us grow with a brand new free subscription to our channel. Before we jump into rewriting history, let's take a look at where we're starting from. In the AL East, the Yankees had a 6.5 game lead on the Orioles. The Yanks had not been to the postseason since 1981, and it was to be the long-awaited postseason debut of Don Mattingly. The AL Central was a brand new creation, and there was a ton of intrigue. The White Sox led by a game and had not won the World Series since 1970. The only team that had a longer drought played across town in the Cubs, who hadn't done it since 1908. The Indians, who trailed the Sox by a game, had not won it since 1948, and if you fast forward to 2022, they are now the franchise who have gone the longest without a title. As a Cubs fan, I tend to bring that up literally anytime the town of Cleveland is a topic of conversation, even when it's not socially acceptable. I was at this wake once and alone with the body at the front of the parlor, and you know what? We don't need to tell that story. 1994 was the birth of the wild card, so it was possible that both of the squads could advance to the postseason as Cleveland led that race by 2.5 games over Baltimore. The AL West was an absolute disaster, but with the new league format of 3 divisions and each division having a guaranteed spot, someone unfortunately had to go to the playoffs. I usually cherry pick my blurbs from a number of sources, but Secret Base wrote an excellent article about the division for SB Nation. The hitting was abysmal. This bar chart quantifies the number of games in which each team in the major scored no more than 2 runs. In all these charts, the AL West teams are in green. This chart quantifies the number of games that each team allowed 10 runs to the opposition, or, revisualized, the 4 teams in the AL West were responsible for 70 of the 176 games in which the opposition went buck nuts. Heading over to the NL, the closest race was the NL Central. The Reds led the Astros by a half game in the division, and it was looking like that division title might be important, as the Braves currently had a 2.5 game lead in the wildcard race. Speaking of the Braves, they were 6 games behind the Montreal Expos in that division. I won't go in depth, as we did an entire video on the 94 strikes screwing Montreal like no team had ever been screwed before. The short version was that this was by far the franchise's best season in its history, which is no surprise as they were pretty stacked with Larry Walker, Pedro Martinez, Moises Alou, Marquise Grissom, and more. The strike really pissed off a lot of fans, which was particularly bad for the Expos, as the premature end of the season squashed whatever momentum they had in proving that Montreal had a viable fan base for a baseball team. The weakest division in the NL was the NL West, where the Dodgers held the division lead despite only being 2 games above 500 at the time. Okay, let's settle this, but first, a quick word about how we handle simulations here. All simulations are done using Out of the Park Baseball 23 and run exactly 1 time unless Johnny went ahead and screwed something up in the setup. Out of the Park Baseball is a computer game that does not take the player's skill into account like MLB The Show, but rather just does its best to create a realistic outcome based off of the team's rosters. Results of these simulations should be considered the one true answer to the questions posed, because the Dugs is the best baseball channel on YouTube, or if you don't buy that, because we call dibs. Let's get it on. We'll start in the AL Central. White Sox came out of the game strong, winning 8 of their first 10 games before slowing down a bit at the end of the month. Time for our older viewers to feel bad about the 30 minutes it took to muster up the strength and courage to get out of bed this morning. 36-year-old Julio Franco had himself a month, going yard 4 times, racking up 20 RBIs, and he even stole a base. This shouldn't come as a surprise, however, as his longevity is second to none in the modern era. He was the oldest regularly playing hitter in the history of the MLB, as he was still racking up at-bats at the age of 48. Oh, and he hit a home run at the age of 48, so that gives him the eldest dinger-bringer record as well. He stole a base that season too to give him that record. Meanwhile, Cleveland and the Royals both started slow, playing sub-500 baseball, which allowed the closest division race to open up a little bit. No idea what the Royals were doing as they managed to sweep the Yankees, who were second only to Montreal in terms of their record, but this only came after being swept by Texas, who, while they are leading their division, they also came into play at 10 games below 500. Cleveland, on the other hand, came on strong in the final week of August to keep it close.
Breaking news. Baseball trainers everywhere shed a tear when Ken Griffey Jr ended his consecutive games played streak short of Gehrig's record of 2,130 when he began experiencing back spasms after stretching a single into a double on August 19th. This forced him to sit out on the 20th, but he was right back in there the next day on the 21st. Frankly, I haven't been this disappointed in a streak ending since Melissa Johnson was covered up at Wimbledon. Safe search off and Google it.
The Yankees came out wanting to win one for Donnie, winning 14 of 19 and expanded their lead to 10.5 games in the division. Paul O'Neill hit 7 home runs, including 2 stretches where he hit a dinger in 3 straight. But what matters to the Yankees fans even more, despite it having no real impact on their standing, no one has played worse baseball than the Red Sox, losing 17 out of 20. Roger Clemens, Danny Darwin, and Aaron Sales spent the latter half of the month doing their best walnut impression and getting shelled.
Breaking news. In 1993, Peter Harnisch sniffed legendary status when he only allowed a single hit in a September game, and that one hit was only scored a hit after a hefty conversation between the umpires. An infield dribbler was hit back to Harnisch and he ended up throwing it away on a difficult play to first. Well, today he got another chance at history, and this time he racked up 27 outs without surrendering a hit. And lost. That's right, his Astros squad also failed to score in the first 9 innings, and so were off to the 10th, tied 0-0. They left Harnisch in there to seize his destiny, but all he seized was a lead-off 10th inning single from the bat of Rondell White. 1 inning later, the opposing Expos would score 2 runs and hand the Astros the loss. In a coincidental twist, his opposite number was Pedro Martinez, who, in 1995, retired 27 perfect outs, only to lose the perfect game against the first hitter in the 10th. An interesting fact I couldn't possibly know, given it is still 1994.
Despite that heartbreak, the Astros finished out the month quite strong, winning 12 out of 19. That said, they actually lost ground to the Reds, who won 14 games in that same time frame. Kevin Mitchell led the way with a simulated slash of .325, .418, .636, and had a 2-home run game in Colorado. He was actually trying to drag bunt both times, but it was mile high.
Breaking news. Where's the justice? Fans of the Atlanta Braves will be asking this for the next 5 to 6 weeks as 1990's Rookie of the Year David Justice aggravated a shoulder injury and will be forced to miss time. This is a huge blow to Atlanta as they struggle to keep up with those upstart Expos in the divisional race. Oh man, those Expos look great, Johnny. You might want to set aside all that talk of difficulties within the franchise. This Montreal team looks like we'll be talking about their long and storied history for decades to come.
Meanwhile, other divisions have more or less held serve while the AL West has gotten extremely competitive, in the way that a pen full of toddlers would get competitive if you threw a cookie in the middle of it. As we roll into September, Houston has slipped ahead of Cincinnati by 2.5 games in the Central, and I believe we have another special report that will clue us in on a big reason why this happened.
Breaking news. The NL Central has been one of the closest races in all of baseball. That race just got a lot harder for the Cincinnati Reds as they lost 9-year veteran Barry Larkin to a major injury, as he broke a bone in his elbow and will miss the remainder of the year, and quite possibly a significant portion of the next year. It was a needless injury as it came in the bottom of the 9th, and the Reds were routing the St. Louis Cardinals 10-1, when Mark Hard-Hittin' Witten took out Barry Larkin to break up a double play. After the game, Mark issued a statement saying, "You guys, that's not why I'm called that. Stop saying that."
Moises Alou and Sean Berry have been huge reasons why the Expos are on the cusp of clinching the NL East, as has the starting pitching. In the month of September thus far, the Expos have allowed over 4 runs twice. However...
Breaking news. The Expos might be a serious contender for the World Series, but they're going to have to do it without their star rookie first baseman Cliff Floyd, whose strained oblique is serious enough to keep him out for the remainder of the season. Floyd did not take the injury well, yelling at ownership that the quality of their playing surface was to blame. Ever inspired to prove a player wrong, the owner came down to the field and attempted to demonstrate that the surface was fine by sliding into second. Donations in his memory can be sent to Grassfields Only Funeral Homes.
The other reason why the Expos have been able to build their lead in the East is because Atlanta has had a very mediocre September, due in part to...
Breaking news. Montreal look to be out of the reach of Atlanta in the AL East, but they're still locked in a battle for the wild card. That battle just gave him a kick to the groin though, as Tom Glavine goes down for the remainder of the season with shoulder issues. There sure seem to have been a lot of shoulder issues in 1994, but remember, Jenny McCarthy was Playmate of the Year.
This mediocrity has made things quite interesting in the wild card race, as Cincinnati and Atlanta now stand in a dead heat for that spot. Say what you will about the AL West, but the NL West is hoping no one notices that they've become equally as embarrassing. On the virtue of landing at one game above 500, the Dodgers have opened up a 6-game lead in the division, and that division doesn't even have the San Diego sideshow to fall back on anymore.
Breaking news. The world wanted to know if Tony Gwynn was going to finish the season with an average above 400. Well, it looks like we're going to find that out early thanks to Tony Gwynn's elbow. Today he suffered an elbow strain that will keep him out for the remainder of the season. Gwynn hit it safely in every game up through his injury, and when you add in the 6 straight games he'd hit in prior to August 11th, that brings his hitting streak to 27. It wasn't quite enough to put him over the 400 mark though. Starting at August 12th, he hit 384, and he's going to end his 1994 season at 392. But don't worry, Tony, 39% still a great number. It was, after all, the number that Abraham Lincoln got in the 1860 presidential election. He won that. That's not a joke, folks. That's history.
Over in the AL, no one has won more games than the Yankees since the beginning of the simulation, as they've gone 24-9 since the Dugs have taken over. One-time All-Star catcher Mike Stanley has been on fire in the front end of September, racking up 3 or more hits on 3 different occasions during the first week. I've forgotten about this guy, and looking at his history, it's no surprise why. He went from the Yankees over to the Red Sox and then back to the Yankees in a 4-year span. Naturally, this turned him into a singularity and sucked him straight out of my mental existence. New York's clinching of the NL East is all but a given at this point, as they stand at 11.5 games ahead of Baltimore. Cleveland has gotten hot at the right time, as they have passed the White Sox in the AL Central, going 13-2 while the Sox have failed to play 500 ball. Carlos Baerga has homered 5 times for Cleveland, and Jeff Russell has been extremely tough in the closer role, picking up 5 saves thus far in the month. The race isn't over, as they're only 5 games back, but the Sox may have to start turning towards the wild card, as they're tied with Baltimore and lead the Royals by 1.5 games in that race. The AL West has become a 2-team race, in the same way that a blind dog racing a sloth is still technically a race. Oakland has taken a half-game lead over Texas, but Seattle has pretty much fallen out of the picture, losing 11 out of 15. To no one's surprise, the Yankees, Indians, Expos, and Astros had no issue clinching their divisions early on, but New York fans may want to grab a box of Kleenex and a slice because...
Breaking news. The Yankees are doing it for Donnie. Mattingly has been a Yankee fan favourite in the Bronx for over a decade now, and they've yet to take him to the postseason. That's all but a given this year, and I'm sure Mattingly will enjoy it. But he'll be enjoying it from the trainer's room. In a year that just keeps breaking our heart over and over again, Donnie Baseball tore his hamstring, which will have him ticketed for the DL through the end of the playoffs. When asked about their reaction to this debacle, the Red Sox, who have been the butt of Yankees jokes all year, having yet to touch double digits in wins since the beginning of the season, made a statement by renting out ad space in Times Square that read, "Run Donnie Run," a reference to the current hit film Forrest Gump and a really sick burn by 1994 standards.
Also of importance, despite finishing with the league's best record at 104 wins, the Expos might be sweating, as now Cliff Floyd appears to be doubtful for the playoffs, and now their closer John Wetland has succumbed to an early season end as well. Meanwhile, the A's have wrapped up the AL West despite finishing 4 games below 500. Texas kept it interesting in the same way that watching blue paint dry is interesting compared to watching white paint dry, but losing 10 out of their 12 games mercifully put their old yeller of a season to rest. That said, the A's are not the only 79-win team going to the playoffs. The Dodgers were slightly less crappy than everyone else in the NL West and will be advancing with the same record. That's not the only thing of interest that happened in the NL West.
Breaking news! It just doesn't get any more exciting than baseball in Colorado. With talks of a humidor on the horizon, you have to wonder if a 4-home run performance by the visiting Barry Bonds will change their mind. Just look at that completely natural, unenhanced swing. It's great seeing a 100% honest player succeed in today's modern game, and he'll close out the season with over 40 home runs for the second consecutive year. This offensive outburst comes just weeks after Andre Galarraga hit 3 out and racked up 9 RBIs in a 23-7 win for the Rockies.
So that leaves the two wild cards. In the AL, the Royals ended up below 500 for the month of September, so they never really entered the picture. The Orioles will finish their season 11 games ahead of the playoff-bound A's and Dodgers, but still 3 games south of a playoff berth, as it will be the Chicago White Sox advancing to the playoffs. Meanwhile, it was high drama in the NL wildcard. The Reds entered the final day of the season, leading the Braves by 1 game in the wildcard race, but nothing had been decided yet. The Braves owned the tiebreaker and had already won by knocking off the league's best team in the Expos. That game was tied going into the top of the 8th when Mike Kelly stepped to the plate and hit a triple with a man on to give the Braves the lead. Never heard of him? 1994 was his rookie season and he was never a full-time starter, so this was most likely the biggest moment of his career. The Terry Pendleton single followed that to put the Braves up 2, which would be good enough to take the game down. And so the Reds' fate was in their hands. Win against the Astros and they're in. Lose, and it's the Braves that take down the wild card. Kevin Mitchell hit a first-inning solo shot for the Reds, and that deficit of 1-0 held true until the 8th when Kevin Mitchell hit another home run to make it 2-0. So that's the score entering the bottom of the 9th as they're 3 outs from making the playoffs. But the dream is over in a flash. A triple by Brian Hunter and an RBI single by Scott Service forces extra innings, and in the 12th, Andujar Cedeno will forever be hated in the city of Cincinnati because he sends them home for the fall with a walk-off single for the Astros. On the last day of the season, Atlanta clinches the wild card and the playoff bracket is as follows. The White Sox will be taking on the Indians. The A's will be taking on the Yankees. The Braves will be hosted by Montreal, and the Dodgers will go to Houston. Before we get into the playoffs, let's take a look at other notable achievements. Kenny Lofton's recent dick pic scandal garnered some headlines in 2022, but the OOTP gods did him a favor and said, hey, would you like an alternative to looking at D's nuts? How about D's stolen bases? Lofton stole 26 bases in the month of September to give him a nice round 100 for the year. Roger Maris's unbreakable home run record of 61 remains unbroken as both Ken Griffey Jr. and Matt Williams ended their year with 53 round trippers apiece. Despite all of the potential historical moments ending in a giant wet fart, there was one bit of history. Carlos Baerga was able to make it 3 straight seasons with 20 home runs, 200 hits, and 100 RBIs. No other second baseman has achieved those numbers even twice in a row. But there's no I in playoffs, which is where we're headed. So let's end this. The White Sox did not hit a single home run in their playoff series, while the Indians hit 5, led by Jim Thome's 2 home runs. The more shocking result is that they took the 5-game series down in 4 games. In Game 1, the story was Darren Jackson for the Sox going 4 for 4 with 4 RBIs, which comprised all 4 Sox runs in their 4-1 victory. Cleveland evened the series up at 1 on the strength of Jim Thome and Albert Bell's home runs, and so they took home field advantage into the remaining 3 games of the series. Game 3 was a pitcher's duel, but Black Jack McDowell secured the 1-0 victory with his 8+ innings of work without any walks, and then finally, in Game 4, the White Sox were able to overcome 3 Cleveland home runs to win the series in advance. Lance Johnson was a huge help in that game and all series long as he stole 4 bases and hit a triple in this final game of the series. Looks like the Indians will have to wait some more for that title, but surely with a team this skilled, they've got to take one down in the next 20 years or so, right? Let's turn to the Yankees-A's series. Should be easy, right? Yankees won 100 games. Oakland was a sub-500 playoff squad. Further, the Yankees took down the first 2 games of the series. Jimmy Key went the distance and pitched a complete game shutout in Game 1, while Paul O'Neill racked up 3 doubles and a triple to propel the Yanks to a 5-3 victory in Game 2. But somewhere on that long coast-to-coast flight, the Yankees forgot how to close things out. Game 3 wasn't close as the A's handed the Yanks a 12-2 loss, where the main story might actually be the A's pitcher, as Bobby Witt threw over 120 pitches and struck out 11 while keeping the Yanks scoreless. Game 4 looked to be going the Yanks' way until Mark McGwire hit a 3-run home run in the 7th to put the A's up 5-4, and that's where that one would finish. Can it be a reverse sweep? Game 5 brought us back to New York, and it was tied at 2 entering the 7th, and it's once again Mark McGwire going yard for a 2-run dinger to secure the shocking Game 5 victory. 100 wins in the regular season are erased by 3 losses to a sub-500 club in the playoffs. Don Mattingly would have preferred to start his offseason just going to golf early, instead of watching this atrocity. For the Expos, every game against the Braves was a nail-biter, but there were only 3 of them, and they all went in the Expos' favor. A walk-off single from Will Cordero took it down in the bottom of the 9th in Game 1. In Game 2, they needed a clutch RBI single from Lenny Webster in the bottom of the 9th to force extras, and then Moises Alou walked the Braves off with a 2-run home run in the 10th. Bullpen just couldn't hold it down for the Braves. It's worth noting that John Smoltz was part of the rotation at this point and not shutting down games out of the pen. Then again, it was Smoltz that got the start in Game 3, and he was outdueled by Ken Hill as they lost 2-1. It was just as close in the other ML playoff. 2 was the widest margin of victory, and that only happened once, but the Dodgers flipped the script, and after making the playoffs with a sub-500 record, they will be joining the other sub-500 squad in the league championships as they swept the Astros. It was a low-scoring series as 4, 3, and 6 runs respectively were able to take the wins down. Sprinkled throughout the series was a walk-off single by Brett Butler in the 10th inning of Game 2, and Mike Piazza picking up 5 RBIs. Jeff Bagwell returned from his real-life injury for the Astros and played well, but it wasn't able to balance out the 2-for-13 performance by Craig Biggio and the combined 2-for-23 out of Andahar Cedeno and Steve Finley. So on to the championship series. It's Chicago and Oakland in the AL, and this one went the distance. The teams split the first 2 games. The Sox thought they were sitting golden as they took a 1-run lead in the 8th off of a 2-run Julio Franco double and Robin Ventura RBI single, both off the super tough Dennis Eckersley, but Ruben Sierra and Terry Steinbach's RBI single took the lead right back in the bottom of the half to take it down. Game 2 was all Sox as they won 10-3 on the backs of 2 home runs from the ageless Julio Franco and Robin Ventura. Then we were off to Chicago, where Oakland took 2 out of 3. Game 3 wasn't particularly competitive and featured Mark McGwire's 5th postseason home run, Ricky Henderson's 6th postseason stolen base, and a random 4 RBI game from Scott Brocious. Game 4 was another explosion of offense, but this time the Sox came out the winner. They got all this offense without the aid of Frank Thomas, as he had 0 official at-bats after walking 5 times in the game. Instead, it was once again the tandem of Julio Franco and Robin Ventura picking up 4 RBIs apiece. In Game 5, a clutch 9th inning home run from the A's' Stan Javier gave the A's the 1-game advantage when Jack McDowell once again shut down his opposition's bats. And so there was a Game 7 in Oakland. I'm sure the Sox were fine with the fact that, as a division winner, the A's got to host this all-decisive game despite winning 14 more games than them in the regular season. But there was lots to be happy about. The White Sox scored 9 runs in innings 5 and 6 collectively. Both Frank Thomas and Julio Franco went 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs apiece. Thomas picked up his 6th double of the postseason, while Franco led all White Sox with 14 RBIs. But somehow it wasn't enough. The A's pulled back within 1 with a 2-run 8th, and the Sox, who were struggling to find a live arm in the pen after all of these offensive games, put in Scott Ruffcorn, and he walked 4 while only picking up 2 outs. In fact, it's the classic walk-off walk that propelled the A's to the World Series after being the laughingstock of the American League. I mean, I'm still kind of laughing, but I'm laughing at a World Series-bound team, I guess. The NL had its own drama, but not because it went to a Game 7. Game 1 was a classic pitcher's duel, as the game featured 3 hits all night, but it was the Spos' Jeff Fassero that came out on top, going the distance and only surrendering a single hit in the 8th inning to Tim Wallach. Game 2 was the only real dominant win, as Mike Piazza connected for 2 home runs and 4 RBIs en route to a Dodgers 6-0 win. Game 3 once again featured a clutch Moises Alou as he put the Expos up 4-3 in the 10th with the sac fly, en route to giving Montreal the 2-1 advantage in the series. In Game 4, the Expos fell down 4-0 early before rallying back and taking a 6-5 lead on a Larry Walker 3-run dinger in the 8th. And then, finally, Montreal got the World Series berth they thought they deserved when down 1-0 in the 9th, Lenny Webster and Rondell White contributed RBIs for the late comeback. Many saw Montreal making the World Series in '94, but I'm willing to bet that very few could say the same about the A's, but that means nothing when it's the first team to 4 wins for the trophy. In Game 1, the Expos led 3-1 going into the 9th. This would normally be an opportunity to bring John Wetland in for the save, but remember that late September injury knocked him out for the season, and so instead it's Mel Rojas. And they had it. They had it. The first 2 men in the inning were retired, and out number 3 was all but recorded as a hard but playable ground ball was hit over to Randy Milligan at first base, but he committed the error. Who is Randy Milligan, you might ask? Well, it's the other guy in the game that likely is only sniffing the playing surface because of the Expos' other big injury in Cliff Floyd. No telling if Cliff Floyd could have made that play, but it keeps the game alive, and okay, let's just assume he could have totally made that play. A single and a walk later, the bases are juiced. Terry Steinbach doubled to tie the game, and then following him, Mike Bordick singled, so the A's took Game 1 down in an absolute shocker as the key injuries rear their ugly heads in the ugliest way possible. Game 2. Montreal once again enters the 9th inning with the lead. This time, Tim Scott's going to get the opportunity for the save. Leadoff man is retired, but a walk, single, and hit by pitch proved to be not useful, and there we were again with the bases juiced. Terry Steinbach once again comes up with the clutch base hit to tie it, and so we're off to extras. Gil Heredia now gets a chance to carry the load for the back end of the Montreal bullpen, but a walk and a single put runners on the corners, and Mike Aldrete connected for a sac fly, while the A's, who haven't lost their closer in Dennis Eckersley, have no problem closing it out. Montreal is forced to go on the road down 2-0. Now, Game 3 wasn't close. Steve Ontiveros threw an absolute gem, completing the game and only surrendering 3 hits to stake the A's to a 6-1 win. And just like that, we're on the cusp of the unthinkable. Are the A's really going to do this? Game 4 started off looking like it was a definite sweep as they led 4-1 entering the 8th, but then the Expos finally figured out Dennis Eckersley and touched him up for 4 runs over the course of the 8th and 9th innings on the strength of clutch hits from Larry Walker, Sean Barry, and 2 dramatic 9th inning solo home runs from Marquise Grissom and Lenny Webster. But no closer, right? It's Mel Rojas again, and the lead is gone quickly. Rojas walked the leadoff man and then surrendered a double to Ruben Sierra to tie the game at 5. They end up with 2 outs and a man on third, and I shit you not, I simulated this exactly once, and this is what happened. The 1994 World Series ends on a Mel Rojas balk, bringing the man home from third. Now, before you scream, that's unrealistic. I want you to go online while you're there, so nailing already, well done. Find an Expos fan and ask them if this feels right. 9 out of 10 fans will probably concede the point that this is just the most Expos shit ever. And so we missed the mark on a ton of potential history, but we did end up with one interesting record. With the World Series victory, the 79-win Oakland A's become the worst team ever to win a championship. The current record in the Major League is the 83-win St. Louis Cardinals, so they smoked that by 4 games. They clinched the ALCS with a walk-off walk, and the World Series with a walk-off balk. I think it's pretty clear that the fates decided that ending the 1994 season prematurely was in fact a mercy killing. And so that will do it for us today. If you enjoyed what you saw here, please help make the Dugs a thing by subscribing, hitting the thumb on the video, and leaving us some feedback in the comments. And 2 more recommendations for you. If you'd like to see another standalone example of a simulation we've run, well, why don't you click Shohei over here as we ask the question if Ohtani's hitting could take out his pitching. Or if you're interested in something longer, check out our experimental baseball tournament playlist, as we just wrapped up a tournament between 8 themed teams like the biggest Hall of Fame snubs and players who had their careers that ended too soon. For Hamish, who is excellent with breaking news updates, I've been Johnny Paprika, hoping all of your balls are fair and all of your wood is good. Good night, everybody!